Welcome. I'm Jeff Carpenter, the founder of Dimensions of Heaven and Earth here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'd like to share with you our next episode of the Templar Spirit. We've been going through different functions and purposes that the Templars had for a lot of their foundation, for their selection on locations. Today, I'd like to dig in a little more into the rule, the actual Templar rule, the set of guidelines, the information that was created, so that not only would other knighthoods understand what the plans were for the Templars, but also how do you introduce a new initiate? How do you spend your time finding someone who's going to follow these tenets, these specific tenets, and sometimes change the way they believe that they should be behaving? The rule, and we'll continue to talk about him probably throughout the entire series, the rule was actually architected and founded by St. Bernard de Clairvaux. We'll mention him a little bit later, but his descriptions, his plan, his connection to the Cistercian monks, the foundation from the Cathars, the Albigensians. How did he start to incorporate this? When he received the papal sanction in 1128 to then create the true and recruit for the Knights of the Temple, the Knights Templar that he was paramount in helping to guide. I want to talk a little bit, and I'm going to read from some of the translations of the rule, because even the first several rules, the preamble, the precursor to the activities of a daily knight, or even the initiates, squires, sergeants, is a discussion on how to think. Is a discussion on how to continue to discuss and practice your own free will. And we're going to start with rule number 1 as the preamble. Studious purification and obedience. Now think about it for a second. Think about it. Think. How does that begin to form the building blocks of the Knights Templar? Studious purification and obedience. But there's a catch. We speak firstly to all those who, despising the isolation of their own free wills and desiring with a pure heart to serve in chivalry with the sovereign king, and by studious purification desiring to fill in and fulfilling permanently the very noble armor of obedience. Breaking that down, the first statements, and in fact this is part of why Bernard de Clairvaux was looking to be the head author, the head composer of this, because the first statement is, we understand that the Knights Templar, the Knights that we want, the organization we want to form, needs its own will. We understand that you are Knights who may be disappointed in some of the other practices, who truly want to follow chivalry, who want to understand that you're going to serve with the sovereign king, not for the sovereign king. The studious purification continues to say, remember, you need to continue your growth, your own spiritual expansion, your physical training. However, the first statement is saying, we understand that you have challenges that we want to address as a community with free will driving our communal choices together. And therefore we admonish you, continuing on, you who have led lives of secular brotherhood until now, in which Jesus Christ was not the cause. Even there, the discussion is saying, remember, we're writing this rule that Jesus Christ, that spirituality, that your connection to service is more important than war, is more important than fighting, is more important than some of the other things that they've seen during the Crusades. Only for human favor you have embraced it. Doesn't necessarily admonish, but it tells you, only for human favor you embraced it, that you follow those whom God has chosen from the mass of perdition, keywords, and who he has ordained by his gracious compassion for the defense of the holy church, that you hasten to join unto them perpetually. Come and join us, stay with us, bring your free will, bring your equality, and recognize that we are all sitting defending the Holy Church, which, as many of you know in the history, is interesting that the entire formation and the wording that was approved includes defending the Holy Church. That's critical, but it's also a reminder that we're looking at canonical law, we're looking at canon law. So that inclusion, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that inclusion of the Templars following canonical law, canon, will then talk about how it was formed and what's written, and not necessarily the different decisions of many of the different leaders were following the canon law as defined. Rule number 2. Even before we've started talking about how we're going to train them, the rule describes guardians of the justice of Our Lady. That's rule number 2, where they're already integrating the sacred feminine and sacred masculine. Before all things, they even said it, before all things, whoever should be a knight of Christ, choosing such holy communion, strained by your profession, must apply pure diligence and firm perseverance, which is so dignified and so holy and so noble and known to be so, that if guarded purely and durably, you will deserve to hold company among the martyrs who have given their souls to Jesus Christ. The first statements of now it's time for perseverance. Now it's time to understand you're not just going to speak, you're going to dive into your spirituality. You're going to commit yourself to manifesting. How are you going to build and help? How are you going to build yourself and your own temple, and how are you going to help build the knighthood? Part 2 of that same rule, in this religion has flourished and is revitalized this order of knighthood, which other knighthoods, which we can only understand that they're referring to the Crusades, despise the love of justice, and which is its own duty. The entire knighthood approach is to have justice, and did not do what it should. The Templars right there, including the writings of St. Bernard of Clairvaux, talk about how they in some way condemn the actions that many of the knighthoods took because they were not practicing justice in their minds. And he even discusses what that means to defend the poor, widows, orphans, and churches, but they strove to plunder, to despoil and kill. This definition, especially when you look at many of the reasons why the Crusades were fought, starts to step out of some of those practices and really focus on what it is that the Templars wish to stand for. How did we then practice? Well, the good works, continuing on, the good works of the Lady of God are with us and our Savior Jesus Christ. In French, Dame Dieu is the word they used in the rule, the Lady of God. That's actually a representation and a known coded description to Saint Mary Magdalene, who in many of the discussions around the apostles, many of them said she was the apostle of the apostles, the apostle to the apostles. The Templars understood that plan for divine information receiving and divine action sending. He has sent his friends from the holy city of Jerusalem on the path to France and to Burgundy, to who our salvation and for spreading belief in the true faith do not cease to offer their souls to God, a pleasing sacrifice. Starting here to outline what the expectations are for even the other knights who know that they've already been knighted and technically they're supposed to be equal. Here is a new plan for how justice and compassion and mercy are to be put back into the chivalry rather than war and overcoming your enemies. Of course, even though this was, allegedly put together and it truly was supported by the Pope, this Council of Troy that was convened, even inside the rule, they had to make sure that they were talking about St. Bernard. Wherefore I, Jean-Michel, that by the grace of God, worthy to be the humble scribe of the present parchment by the commandment of the Council of Troy, and of the venerable Father Bernard, Abbot of Clairvaux, was entrusted and committed to them to this divine office. Bernard had no interest in allowing this to go without his oversight, to make sure that the mandates of what he and Hugh de Payne and the other masters of founders of the temple wanted to actually get down in writing. He didn't want that interrupted by kings or information, and there were many abbots and religious leaders in place at the council. They wanted to make sure he was still put out as the founder and he truly organized this council. We're going to skip a little bit to rule number 9. We haven't even gotten to the daily behavior of what a knight should do. How should they eat? How should they dress? Rule number 9, universal studies for holy truth. I can't think of a better way to start the discussion of where the Templars truly wanted the knighthood to become, what they really wanted to practice, while looking at the first 10 to 15 rules that talk about study. You renouncing your own wills and becoming servants of the sovereign king with horses and with arms, for the salvation of your souls, during periods of time, will study universally. And that study universally means many things. You're going to find commerce. You're going to find spirituality. You're going to find, let's say, the Sufis, the other mystics. You're going to find the Kabbalah practitioners. How are you going to look for those who have this additional knowledge that they're also practicing? Remember, and it's been a theme throughout this series, the Templars were very interested in finding how to make peace and share information across the multiple religions that, in many cases, they were supposed to be enemies with. Considering that they started to share and find out they had some of the same practices, of course they started to understand more about how the same expectations of different mystic orders would then fall into place with what the Templars wanted to do, knowing their origins as Christian mystics. For the salvation of your souls, during periods of time, study universally, with purity of desire to hear even matins or the entirety of the service within the canonical law, important distinction, and the customs of the regular masters of the holy city of Jerusalem. So notice right there, we're saying, yes, we're going to follow the letter of the canonical law, the canon of the church, and the regular masters of the holy city of Jerusalem. Here is how the framework then defines what the Templars are saying they're going to follow. And it's going to be signed by all the people present at this council. O you venerable Templars, for this purpose God is with you, that you forego the deceiving world and despise it. Here is where the Templars begin their discussion of truth. What is true? How do you commit yourself to truth? Not the judgment, not the interpretation. How do you find spiritual universal truth? For the perpetual love of God, you forego the deceiving world and despise it, and despising the torments of your own body. Not going through many of those expectations that were there at the time. Satiated by the meat of God and watered and instructed by the commandments of our Lord. The purpose of divine service. Never fearing to go into battle, but being dressed with the crown of protection. The word choice is pretty important, and many of you know me, I'm very stuck on words because the truth of what's being said is the will and the word. How do you create the most effective truth? You have to use the very specific words that then convey what you're looking for. Despise the deception. We already know we're talking about protection from evil, defending widows, defending children, defending those who cannot protect themselves. It's part of the Templar oath. But it also is then making sure in the discussion, in the rule, that we are discussing deception. Doesn't make a claim on where. It makes the deception part of what Templars need to use for discernment. Part of what then comes out of this, as we talk about now, some of the manifestation, and we're going to talk about manifestation with the Templars probably pretty frequently. Years, thousands of years before Christianity, different traditions, different mystics, different organizations. We talk about the Native Americans, we talk about the Egyptians, we talked about Sufi, Kabbalah, were practicing what they see as a mystical revelation. It's a secret mystical ritual that many already know. So, I don't know how secret I'd say it is, but imagine spending 3 years of your life as a Templar, going through and understanding the military arms, ranking, fighting as a group, studying as a group, worshiping as a group, and then you get your turn. There's an entire symbolism of then going into the ground, into one of the Templar vaults, using all the sacred geometry of the design of how to consecrate, and then focus the energy onto the initiate. Imagine metaphorically dying and being reborn into a higher state. Of course, the 3 years up in front of it, you need to train, you need to practice. They go through and show you how you get into those states. But you're looking at the other world. You're looking at the astral plane. You're connecting to other spirits. You're making yourself known that you are ready to have a closer connection with the divine. All to give you this living resurrection process, this transformation. It's not just how are we going to find a better spiritual connection to the Lord. It's also reminding us of the fear we get to let go of when we know that the true nature, the true connection to reality is the fact that we are all connected, that we are all spiritual beings, that we are all able to understand that transformation from this world to the next. And you do it individually. You do it for yourself. You have a personal, stronger connection to the divine. And imagine the amount of fear that disappears. Those of you going through your own spiritual journeys, your own spiritual elevation, remember those times when suddenly you went, oh my goodness, this is actually real. Oh my goodness, this is actually growing. Take that and put that into the Templar approach for how do we have the fighting force and the spiritual force that we want. Consider it. Because then, why do you think in the rule they're discussing have no fear in battle? Because you've already understood as a knight what you're fighting for and what your purpose is if you're truly committing to this manifestation of your highest good. Because then it's service and there is no end. There's a commitment to how you already know what's sitting in the other world. How do you already connect yourself more strongly? How do you know, not believe, that you truly are a warrior for God? They've been doing this worldwide. This is not something that's a big surprise, but yes, imagine having the experience where the final phase is somewhere around the winter solstice, which is coming up. We start at the spring equinox and go to the winter solstice. Why? What do you? Of course, it's the symbolism of how the light is expanding until the fullness, and then how you finally go through that darkness and come out the other side, reborn, when the winter solstice now has the light returning to the world. It's one of the strongest descriptions of spiritual development that you can have because then you are doing it yourself. That commitment to manifestation also required all that study, required all that training, required both the standing in fear in the physical and the standing in fear in the spiritual, and not allowing deception, seeking truth. That's our message for this episode. Your transformation, your manifestation comes from your thought forms, your practices. Remember what you've been taught as well as what you're looking to expand to. Sometimes you need to retrain. Even the knights who already may have all the power they had, the strength, the war experience, still were first admonished in the Knights Templar to say, remember, we are servicing spirituality. We are here serving the Christ. You may not have done that, you may not like it, but when you do, imagine the strength that you're going to have. Thank you for listening today. We look forward to sharing more with you soon. Remember that as we come up, and I think it's tomorrow for the publication of this video, for the solstice, for the balance, look at what it is you want to change. What is it that you want to manifest? And what is it that you may not be looking at? I will leave you with the message of this is not the discussion of fake it until you make it. I've never liked that phrase. I don't like the fake it part. And honestly, out of the blue yesterday, what came to me was instead of fake it until you make it because you're already knowing you're not it, that's not manifestation. Knowing that you already have it and you're just waiting for time to catch up, to me, seems a little better to say, be it until you see it. Become who you want to be and watch the manifestation as things align and you magnetically attract what you're looking for. Have a wonderful day. Go manifest, begin your planning, and we will absolutely see you soon. Thank you for joining us.